only because it affects me personally, but because so many of the other problems you have listed there are impacted by bringing new, highly polluting industries into areas, especially the unincorporated areas where, you know, there's no chance for people protecting themselves. But they create additional waste. They're going to, and the thing is, there are some regulations that could be enforced to help the people. They're not being enforced. The IT aren't. I don't know, and again, they were kind of telling us this maybe shouldn't come through the legislature, but EQ did follow their own rules.
Well, that whole issue of what I'm hearing is a discussion of siting, and then we're talking about what is being cited. I mean, part of it is the actual waste facilities that we were talking about there for a moment, which was hazardous and solid waste. You're also talking about industrial facilities, period, regarding that.
Right, because they're creating a need for more solid waste and hazardous waste
Clear,
facilities.
that's right. But the issue of siting, frankly, given the amount of hazardous waste that we import, as long as there are factories out there, we're going to bring the waste in. So the issue of whether a plant exists in Louisiana is a separate issue in terms of the problems that it causes, rather than the waste issue. So there are two elements then of the siting issue. One is all of the regulations surrounding solid and hazardous waste site siting, and the other is the industrial siting issue, which gets back, both of which are affected by IT, but gets back to some of the other issues, foremost and things like that.
Well, I was just going to say, rather than limiting it to solid and hazardous waste, any facility which uses, handles, generates, stores, or disposes of hazardous materials. Talk about increasing buffer zones, as opposed to, we've already heard some discussion about whether or not we want to deal with some legislation on IT decision, rather than specifically calling it IT, talk about buffer zones, expensive buffer zones.
She is asking if what about not a moratorium, but a ban on siting of any waste facilities in floodplains or so a prohibition against siting of any waste. I think the description that you used, which involves substances, no matter at what stage they are, whether they're being created or being disposed of, a ban against siting of those facilities within the flood zone, coastal zone, or wetlands. Let me back up just a second, because what we're about to do is to list every environmental problem associated with an industrial facility and say we don't want them, okay? So rather than make a list of legislation to affect every individual one of those, is the approach that we've taken regarding IT, regarding the requirement of environmental impact statement, is that going to be, should it be sufficient to deal with all of the surrounding issues? We talked about creating a buffer zone, which is a practical implementation of protection. But when we start listing aquifers, when we start listing whose house is going to be closest to, we're probably going to run into a problem at how detailed we're going to get. What's the most comprehensive way for us to do that in terms of legislation? We talked about IT, that's one approach. We talked about buffer zones in general, that's one approach. Is there anything else that we should broadly list that will capture that?
Because I was on during the previous administration, maybe Joel here, we were supposed to promulgate those rules, the siting rules for IT, because the Supreme Court in its decision told DEQ to promulgate the to come up with some regulations, you know,
Possibly a resolution.
right, to set a date, to come up at let's say the end of 3 years, should have these promulgated over 1 year, whatever,
So
everybody.
the idea would be whatever vehicle it took to legislatively require promulgation of regulations as from IT.
Bill, I don't think the Supreme Court, it's my understanding, I don't think they said you have to do regulations. It just said you have to address this. And by going by what Representative Randy Roach said this morning, I would really be a little concerned about losing the IT, getting it wrapped up, because whoever's challenging something can use the IT decision. They were suggesting go forward with a state NEPA, saying that they would have to do environmental impact statements, et cetera. And in the environmental impact statement, you're going to do all this citing criteria. You consider everything. So I would almost rather see us take something that's not going to hurt the IT decision, where that's still safe and that's in place, and any one of us can use that, and we do use it on a regular basis. But yet, by this resolution that they're talking about, it's something that's positive. And I don't know about y'all, but this morning, I definitely have a feeling that we're going into this legislature with doom and gloom this year because of our new administration. I think this is something that we could pass that would start working toward that citing criteria about doing a resolution about the state forming the state NEPA, which would, in essence, do what you're asking, I believe. At least that's my
Well,
understanding.
I think we've got a common goal. I was trying to work within an existing framework. It might be easier, but
The Supreme Court didn't mandate that they do anything as far as listing, but they did say you have to address this.
I tell you what, let's do this, and then we'll prioritize as we go. Let's also list legislative mandate to implement IT as on this list, and then we'll come back and see where we end up.
Use the term resolution. Use the term, tell them strategy.
We'll have to decide that. What I'm trying to do right now is decide yes or no on any of these things. In terms of prioritization, we'll do that as we get the list built. See if we get the list built.
Change mandate to resolution though.
Can everyone see this, or is it getting too far down the page?
Once you turn it.
I'm gonna actually post it on the board so you can see where we're looking.
Citing is obviously a huge issue. I think we're all agreed on that. How best to address it is what we'll have to be creative enough to come up with.
You know who we had some of our worst fights with is real estate people. Even as bad or worse than industry about trying to do anything recyclable.
Because it restricts the use of property. Yeah.
Thanks.
Same issue.
Local governments being able to make their own regulating and citing authority. There's a law right now that says a parish cannot pass this kind of legislation unless it has enabling legislation. And you don't know whether you have it or not until it's too late, until you're told you can't make regulations. So I think we're going to ask that every parish automatically be given enabling legislation so that it can pass zoning and waste ordinances without having to get caught
cases
It was
is
the zoning.
Calcasieu had adopted zoning parish-wide
Right.
a number of years. This is the BFI I-10 sulfur site. And the guy next to it wants to sell his land. The parish already had zoning in place because they were fighting the expansion of the Kim Waste site with Carlos. In this case, your parish is trying to come in with zoning after the process started.
In order to protect
And the
yourself.
court rules, I think correctly, that the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury already had zoned correctly, and they had the authority to stop that expansion. But in St. Martin Parish, since they had not done parish-wide zoning previously, they were stopped.
But then St. Martin Parish passed a piece of legislation, which is a waste ordinance bill, saying you cannot cite things in this parish without variance from our government. And you, and they zone the whole parish light commercial so that they couldn't do it. And the way it was overturned was that they didn't have legislation from the state to pass their own waste ordinances.
Citing ordinances.
Yeah.
Let me raise, since, well, in some places it is, in some it isn't.
I mean,
There's a
doesn't
charter
home
issue
rule
which is
give you the
separate.
right to do these things? I think that's what she's saying.
Yeah, but the Calcasieu Parish doesn't have.
Ours
home
was
rule.
zoning. Willie said.
That's what I'm saying, that's what she's saying.
Let me ask one, Eloise, in response to the question about home rule, my understanding, which may not be complete, but my understanding is that home rule is a term of art that is used specifically in certain kinds of governing bodies. It refers to their own charters and things like that. It doesn't apply statewide. The issue of home rule is not what it sounds like it would be. It's not that we can control our own fate. It just is used in some of those instances. There was also, as I appreciated, a problem in St. John Parish with the medical incinerator siting, and that stimulated an awful lot of debate last session, as I recall, about control of local ordinances and siting of hazardous waste, in this case medical incinerator. Does anybody remember about that, or am I just
That's the same enabling
the same
legislation
issue?
problem.
We have it in Katy Parish too, but we're going to court right now over hazardous waste facilities. You have it, but you're gonna have to defend it.
But if you don't
What if
do
you-
that, then you have to go to legislature and
Well, something like number one would make things more clear for those right now that want it and don't have it.
All right, well, that's, so clearly need a sense of clarity on that particular issue.
Well, Willie, on that Calcasieu, that's in the zoning, and that's what Willie.
Yeah, okay.
It came down to.
I think number one, correct me if I'm wrong, but number one, as it is written, seems to, or would seem to clarify these issues. It would make it very clear what local government could do, in fact, could do more than state government to protect itself.
That's exactly what that is for, it's this kind of situation.
Is there another one of these sheets?
Steve, I think that by going with this legislation, I certainly feel a lot more comfortable, because if we give our local authorities some great powers that local politicians are a lot cheaper to me to buy off than hire. So I wouldn't want to give them too much power, but I would want to give
Well,
them
as
some.
I appreciate it, let me make sure I understand this approach, because what I appreciate in saying is that local authorities can go further than state
Right, that's why I
authorities.
say I feel comfortable with this one, but I'm afraid the other way, we give them power and it's
All right, what's next, Carl?
Along that vein, something that is having an impact on us right now in Tangipahoa Parish, and I don't know if it is other people, but I'm led to believe that it may be more widespread than I knew about as recently as 3 or 4 months ago, and it gets back to the comment about local authorities. The drainage district in our Tangipahoa Parish has decided that they want to use helicopters and buy $40,000 worth of a chemical and spray it on the drainage canals to control willow trees and roots and things of that nature. And they didn't ask anybody, they didn't particularly tell anybody. We happened to catch it in a local newspaper in the fine print where they have to publish that, they were going to go out for a bid on it. But certainly we don't all rush home at night to catch this small local town newspaper just so we can check to see what the politician's about to do to us. And as we checked into this, we found out that DEQ doesn't apparently have any particular problem with the use of this chemical, that it is commonly used throughout the state, if not throughout the nation, except for maybe in California where they've banned the use of aerial spraying of this particular herbicide. It's herbicide, not pesticide, which gets me to number 10 here, which states require record keeping and reporting of all pesticides used on. I might just, get into that.
Herbicide is a
It is considered, I'm sorry, all right, it's a subset of it, okay.
Do you know what the
Mistake corrected.
herbicide is?
I believe it's called rodeo, and it's the same thing as Roundup, but it's used for situations where you'd be, aquatic plants, things of that nature. So I'm wondering if there is in some way for legislation, and the question I have is, and I'm led to believe that this is controlled solely by the Department of Agriculture, and that DEQ doesn't have much to say over this. Well, we're not growing any sellable crops in these ditches, so why would agriculture have anything to do with the control of those particular areas? I talked to Randy, and he said that he has a bill, that he was running out the door. I didn't get any details. Someone else, I think, mentioned to me that there is some effort being made to control the use of these pesticides on areas classified as wetlands, so maybe that'll give us some assistance as well. But I would just let you know that this happens all over the place, and I don't think that we've really known about it, and we need to at least focus on it and see if we need to take and legislate that DEQ has more authority over this and regulatory authority than they currently do.
Would number 10, putting number 10 in the person here, would that cover your idea? Or do you need it?
Well, that's not regulation, that's just record keeping, but that would certainly help. I mean, in over 10 acres, and also this idea about the buffer zones certainly should help as well. But so I don't know how to word this.
I think my sense is that the discussion surrounding the use of pesticides, especially, I didn't realize that definition either, herbicides is a subset of that, the same concerns are there. The misuse, the overuse, and the lack of regulation of those chemicals are what's at the heart of this, and if we could set up an institutional solution, structure, and work out some of these specifics in that process, that's probably the right vehicle to do it. And just be a thought, that's a good understanding.
Can I add something to that? Last year, we got a resolution through the Department of Transportation and Development on roadside spraying, and what we did was that they had to implement regulations by resolution, implement regulations along roadsides, and if you lived along a roadside, you could get what's called a no-spray permit, which says that you'll mow your own grass and take care of it along the roadside so they won't use herbicides or pesticides, because a lot of people's cows and things were dying from it running off into the bayous and stuff, and the cows were drinking out of it. So that's one thing that y'all should be aware of. The other thing that might cover this is a notification statute, which says that anytime over a certain amount of pesticides are being used, that they have to notify people within a quarter mile of that area, either by newspaper, by putting a flag in the field, or some other way. Different states do it. Maine, New York, a couple other states have notification statutes, and right now all we have is a sensitivity register in the state, which says that if you're ultra sensitive to pesticides, that you can tell the Department of Agriculture, and the applicator may let you know when he sprays. There's no mandatory requirement that he notify you. So that's a suggestion, that the notification, at least, maybe we can't prevent them from using the pesticides, but at least you could know about it and you could get out of the area when they're doing it.
Let me ask you a question, Mary Lee. Okay. How much time do we have? I just realized. Two. Oh, is that right? Oh, I thought we were. Great. There's a question up front here about use of chemicals on lawns.
Your neighbor had somebody come in.
Kim Care, Lawn Care, and various people come along and paint your lawn green, put a sign in it saying you're treating your lawn.
Yeah, that would cover urban uses as well. If you get your house tented or something, if they use it, you'd have to have some minimum amount of pesticides that would kick it in.
I
So
will tell you
if you
just
spray and
for
raid
fact,
your own house, it would, it has to be-
urban uses of pesticides and herbicides is about 6 to 7 times the amount of agricultural production. So the exposure route is clearly there. And that's out of the Wall Street Journal of all places.
Your neighbor doing it, and you're the next, you're next door.
Steve, as long as we're on pesticides, one thing I want to make clear that definitely has to be done, and it's so simple, nobody even knows that it exists, but there is no requirement in this pesticide law that the certified herbicide applicator, that is the person that goes and takes the test to spray these things, has to ever be on site when they're being sprayed. So this is the most significant change that we have to change in this pesticide regulation. Aside from spraying areas and notification, the actual person with the knowledge doesn't have to be there, so that we have unsupervised, unknowledgeable people spraying these herbicides and pesticides. In the case of utility companies, they are exempt from the owner-operator's license, and the contractor companies do not have to have a licensed certified applicator on site when they're being applied. In fact, there have been cases where the Asplin applicator has been in Little Rock, Arkansas. The regulation says in contact with. That can mean telephone, it can mean carrier pigeon, it just means in contact with. So I think the most significant change, if you're going to go after pesticides and regulation, is to tighten up the regulation to say the person spraying the herbicides has to have the knowledge. It doesn't make any sense to use taxpayer money to train these people if they're nowhere around when they're being used.
And they use the cheapest pesticides, these commercial, use the cheapest pesticides they can buy, which are highly detrimental to the agricultural crop.
All right.
In reference to pesticide use, is there any way we could implement some type of research for alternatives? And we can, get all these, look at all these laws and regs and.
Well, right now I'm working with a professor at UNO, and they're I forget the name of the department at UNO, but they are doing research and compiling data on how much pesticides and herbicides are used and what the alternatives could be instead of using them. So we're in the process of doing that right now.
Would a study resolution,
Yeah.
would a study resolution requiring a report to be provided back to the legislature about the uses of whatever you want to list in that, would that accomplish that? That's a legislative solution. That's in fact just asking for the information. Willie.
Yeah, question, problem was pointed out here, and it's concerned me a lot, and it's the adequacy of public notices. And I think it's totally inadequate to have little teeny notices in the classified section, and also many of the notices that go out from the agencies that are mailed to people are incomprehensible. A lot of the DEQ notices that go out in accordance with Louisiana Revised Section 30, it goes on and on for 12 pages. You're never sure what the issue is. And so we need some major changes in the way the public notices occur. The Office of Conservation, much to its credit, has something in its regulations that said if you want a commercial solid waste disposal site, you've got to put a 1/3 page ad in the local paper 30 days before you ever submit an application. And we need, I don't know exactly what needs to occur, but I think we need something to change, to demand that for environmental permits, it's got to be really adequate public notice. Significant ads in newspapers.
Written in English, right?
Yeah, and the public notices from the agencies need to be written in a way to inform.
There are statutes, and it might be a direction to go in, there are statutes requiring insurance policies, for example, to be written in ways that average consumers can read. There may be something that we could borrow from that approach and put that onto regulations. So it'd be interesting to hear industry argue against that.
But it's three things. One is adequate notice when an application goes into an agency. Because sometimes the citizens find out about it a year or two later. Two is the adequacy of or the inadequacy of the current classified ad notice. And the third is the notices which are sent out to the public. The public notices are just totally inadequate. To tell you what the subject, the hearing's even taking place of what it is. So those are three areas. And I think a legislative resolution requiring all the agencies to come in and demonstrate that they have something in place that assures that the public is getting adequate public notice.
Why can't they put the name or number of the road rather than the township and
Well, that's the kind of
track
deal.
of whatever? People don't know where they live by that.
Well, that's the whole
Road.
point. They don't want you to know. That's the whole point.
Concept are y'all comfortable that this concept reflects that and we can work out the details?
Yeah.
Except, yeah, but we still need to emphasize, not just plain English, that something that people recognize.
That's what I mean by English. It needs to be understandable.
Well, a description
Range
of
Township
something,
product
a
is
description where people know. Commonly known, recognizable description.
Okay, the size of the ad, that's the size of the print. The size of the ad.
Okay, on the subject of public notification, we had talked about, clean, about the, on bodies of water that are posted, contaminated by the DEQ or by the EPA. I think that there needs to be some form of resolution before the legislature that requires that fish that are caught from that contaminated body of water, that are commercially caught, that the warning goes with the fish to wherever it's sold. And that goes under public notification. The Louisiana Wildlife Federation recently passed a resolution on notification of contaminated lakes, notifying the public. If there's a contaminated body of water in your area, they passed a resolution that that notification should be made statewide. What I am trying to emphasize is that we come up with some type of law that would require that any fish that are caught commercially in a posted contaminated body of water, that warning follow the fish.
Tagging system, something
Right.
like that.
Is that legal? Is that legal anyway, if it's a posted area for them to fish and sell?
Yeah, it's not, doesn't matter, they don't read signs, people don't read.
I know, but is that legal?
Doesn't matter.
Well, I know, but if it's.
I'm sorry?
That's not legal.
Well, where the idea came from, I think the Calhoun estuary just discussed that very issue, was that a body of water in the Lake Charles area was supposed to contaminate it. The media followed a commercial fisherman who caught fish from that body of water. He took that fish over to Texas, he sold it to a restaurant. That restaurant had no indication that that fish was caught from a contaminated body of water, and people sat naked.
Do you think that fish would have, that fisherman would have told where he caught it?
No.
And that it was a contaminated body of water? He wouldn't have, or he would have sold it then?
Well,
They would tag them.
You gotta take every bag of oyster, you might as well take
That's
your
right.
bushel of shrimp.
That's a good point.
So-
Then put on the tag.
Tag fish caught in contaminated water.
That's it.
Wait, that's gonna be a different topic, isn't it?
Well, it's under public notification, didn't that?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Would you all suspect that if in fact that was implemented, does that mean that that fisherman can no longer sell that fish because I'm not gonna buy it from him? Does that mean that he's gonna put more heat on the people putting the chemicals in the water and maybe we make some progress?
That's the point, that's the point, that's it.
I mean, we have a tax on marijuana in Louisiana. Now, the theory is that nobody's gonna pay that tax, right? Because they're gonna cut it. It's actually a race of money.
They're now saying you can eat fish out of Bayou Den, Willie. You can now eat fish out of Bayou Den.
No, I can't. No, you can't. No, I can't.
No, I can't.
They're saying it's okay, just don't eat more than 4 meals a month.
Right.
I'd like to pick up on this issue on something that may or may not fit in what we're talking about. The coastal marsh is the nursery ground for practically all of our economically important fishes, and shrimp and crabs. There was a bill introduced in the House last year that I won't go through all the machinations that went on, but eventually it ended up passing the House with only 2 dissenting votes and passed the Senate with no dissenting votes. This bill would have allowed 5 individuals or corporations to let in the natural reproduction on 250,000 acres of marsh, keep it ready for harvest, and then harvest all the shrimp and crabs. And in the process, it would essentially wiped out all of the young fishes in the same process. They weren't allowed to harvest the fish, but they would probably kill them all. essentially we lost the production of about 10% of our marsh down there.
Where at?
Didn't specify, it just said that 5 permits would be given of 50,000 acres each. And they called it miracle, but it was a tracking bill. And the only reason we don't have it as a law is the governor vetoed it last year. It may very well come up again this year.
Do you know the number of the bill?
We'll be watching that bill. The people pushing the bill are friends of Edwin Edwards. I think it will probably come back up.
That's the Sharon.
Maybe those names well all together.
What are the names?
Well,
The
it's
Jeremys.
Jeremy's. That's the
They're also
family.
trying to do it in Terrebonne Parish by building.
Primarily
a bunch of
LaFourche and
levees.
Terrebonne Parish.
This,
Who carries the bills for them?
the Jeremy family that were real big friends of Chavez.
Lyndon Chabert did last.
And he carried it and, you know, a number of others, but
It was
Since
introduced
the
by,
family tradition continues, I think we have.
Yeah. it
it
will
was
come up.
introduced by Syracuse and Kimball.
Yeah.
Kimball's now deputy director of wildlife and fisheries. I don't know what that is.
Oh, wow.
Syracuse is coming back, right?
Yeah.
All right, that's good, hands up.
Be sure.
All right, we're looking at 2 o'clock, we're gonna wrap up at 3 o'clock, so let's get out, everything out that we can get out, so then we can start the more difficult process of prioritization. What do you say we give, I don't wanna cut anything off, but if we give this another 15 minutes in terms of getting issues out, you think that'll cover it, and then we can start talking about how to prioritize? Is that okay? Everybody agrees? Let me go back here. Jen?
Clean indoor air laws regulating side street cigarettes both in both public places and work sites.
Clean indoor air laws regulating cigarette smoking and what?
And public places and at work sites.
I think this goes under the storage of hazardous chemicals. I don't know if we had already discussed that. That was, we need to come up with some type of regulations with the railroads on the storage of hazardous chemicals in train cars and residential areas. We need some type of buffer zone. You go in any area of Louisiana where there are railroad tracks, usually they switch the cars in right around residential areas.
Black area.
Minority areas, poor areas. I'm sorry. And in the country, whatever. I think there needs to be some type of regulation on railroad companies.
There's regulations, there's regulations, it's just not enforced.
It's not enforced.
Right.
Then we need stronger regulations.
We've just gone through it because we tried to get a regulation passed for, it's non-hazardous material you can control by your parish. Hazardous material is controlled by the state. And there are regulations, they're just not enforced. They're all there, they just,
Let me ask a question in that regard. I mean, because of, my fiance carries a book around that lists the designations of hazardous materials, so that when you stop at the train track, you can see what's going by, and it just scares the absolute hell out of you.
Oh, yeah.
What's going through your communities. Is there any, does anybody know if there is any compilation, documentation of what does go through our communities?
yes. There is documentation, what goes through our communities, the railroad keeps manifests, but they, you know, you have we have little problems. I mean, these are our little problems. We have green coat that blows out of this thing because they're uncovered. And we've looked all this up. Manifests are kept on hazardous regulations, and they're very close and very tightly done with the railroad. When you get involved in what you're breathing sometimes, like we're breathing green coke that is constantly being blown because these rail cars sit there and the stuff keeps going out at us. And it gets to the point of how they deem what green coke is hazardous or non-hazardous.
Well, with hazardous waste, you're right, there's a manifest system that's in place. But one thing that doesn't occur is the gathering together of that information so that you can see, either on a community-wide basis or a statewide basis, the amount of what you're actually having to deal with. That's the hazardous waste thing. So that's my question, is whether or not there's anything that requires that. The second part is the non-hazardous, which is not affected by that manifest system, is probably not documented and certainly not gathered in any comprehensive fashion at all. If the point is true that we've got adequate regulation, what we need to do is provide information, would be a thought, so that people understand that it needs to be regulated, therefore it needs to be enforced. Is there a way for us to mandate the gathering of that information?
We try and mandate the railroad.
Yeah, well, the railroad is a private industry.
Right.
And so they come into a chemical company and they pick up or they deliver chemicals. It's very difficult to get the information, even though we have the right to know laws and all of that. You have to go through all the paperwork. They make it extremely difficult for you to know any chemicals they're carrying. They're supposed to mark all their cars. A lot of times they're not marked. We just went through this in Plaquemines Parish with wanting to know what's going through the town. There was 2 derailments since the beginning of the year already, and luckily there wasn't anything in the cars, but supposedly there was. We don't even know what's going through town, and it's literally going next to people's homes and children's schools.
What is a legislative solution that we can?
The legislative solution, to my knowledge, the only requirement that the railroads have to have as far as knowledge of what they're carrying are their MSDS sheets, material
Right.
safety data sheets, which are carried in the engine of the train.
Right.
That is supposed to be public record, okay? Other than that, that's it. Well, my thing, flag the train down and ask them what you carry.
But you still won't know what it
They
is.
carry hydrofluoric acid by train into the Mobile and Murphy site by us.
What really
Solution, we got a big
Okay,
solution.
solution is a buffer zone. Now, when I say buffer zone, I mean, of course, trains are gonna go on the railroad track. What my concern is, and what I was initially talking about, was that they are storing these train cars for days and days, waiting to be switched in residential areas. This came up because I was at a school one day on the playground, and 20 feet from the fence where the kids were playing was a vinyl chloride car. It was full of vinyl chloride, okay? And it was waiting to be shipped. That car sat on that track in that very spot for 6 days. That's my concern.
And they've had to evacuate Lake Charles.
They've evacuated that school 5 times.
You're suggesting a residential buffer zone for hazardous material.
To be stored, to stop.
To be stored.
They need to move on,
They
find
need to
it.
move on or something.
Is everybody clear on that? That's the second issue.
Right.
What's actually being transported through.
Besides the buffer zone, and I don't know if we could do this through legislature or not, because since they're separate from the companies they deal with, is that there's no real emergency response system in Plaquemines Parish for the railroad and the community. There's none. So if something really did happen, we would be lost as to what to do. There's no emergency response system set up for the community. So I don't know if we could do that through legislature or
Let me
if
ask
that
you a
would have to
question.
be
There is
legislature.
an emergency response system set up for industrial facilities.
For industrial, but not for the
That's
So
railroad.
maybe legislatively an extension of that
Right.
system to storage yards, railroad storage yards would be.
That would be a good solution.
Yeah.
That would be a good solution.
The LAPCC is supposed to do that. They're already, yeah, no, that's in place.
But they don't.
Letting a train sit on the side and LAPC, local emergency planners. That's in place, Steve.
That's a good point.
They include the rail, the LAPC, that includes the railroads and any hazardous waste, not just, fixed facility. LAPC, Local Emergency Planning Commission, has this. Now, they're not on that, aren't active.
So again, we're dealing with non-enforcement. So LEPC could,
Yes, they do. I know that they do. I sit on, I'm sitting in on their meetings and they, automobiles, trucks, trains. What happens is that we don't have a LEPC in a lot of areas that are working.
So if I understand that correctly, then we're saying that again, we're getting back to the point
We have this
that the
legislation.
law seems to be, at least at this point, the law seems to be adequate. The implementation and the enforcement is not. So we have to find a vehicle to require implementation of these affecting railroads and enforcement of them once it's implemented. Is that right?
Okay. LEPC and the state police. What is it again? And the state police.
Maybe in general, it's not see as to what is, where the storage areas are. You know, maybe that's it, maybe that's how they got, maybe that's why they got such a leeway, that's where they put it there, so you shouldn't have to show away from where's the storage area.
If the environmental, if the emergency, what's it called, LEPC? If it's doing its job, as I appreciate, it should identify those areas. It should be part of its job to do this. So what you're saying is correct, which I appreciate. If we make them do their job, if we find a way to make them do their job, they will have to do that as part of it.
Is it possible then that you could make it mandatory for these LEPCs? I guess that each community is supposed to have them, is that correct? That it's mandatory that they have to file a report at some set frequency and give the status of, all the regulations that have been violated, or how many people they have prosecuted, or at least get that information to the public. So, because right now I sense that, again, a lot of things are happening that we don't like or are concerned about, but we don't, we're busy people. We have a lot of things that we're doing each day, and we can't count the cars going by, and no one else is either, and it's just kind of, well, we'll get to it next week. So, but it has to be in a manageable package that we can look at quickly, or we're overwhelmed.
Well, see, I know that's taking a few minutes, and like you said, long time. But we're gonna do revised public notification. If I'm selling real estate or whatever it is, if you buy a house in an area that if I sell you a house, and I don't know, 500 feet away is a railroad track, and thereby they're starting to have this place. And I sell you this house, and you move in there, and you find out later that there's no law for it. Then, I mean, you have lost your money, and, it's just a whole big hassle. And it is happening a lot more. So I think that should be in a class, people should know where the storage areas are, so that you will know when you return home, why train cars are sitting in your front yard.
So maybe separate and apart from the emergency response approach, which is prepared for a disaster, is a peer notification approach, just to let the community know what is in their community. Because that affects property values, that affects quality of life, choices, individual choices.
That's a multiple, see, but we don't always know that. That's a multiple choice.
So that's separate.
It's all environment.
Well, those cars have been leaking over there,
That's right.
and they had to evacuate. There should be parks in those communities.
We're winding down with 3 minutes left to go on the broad.
Come on, you're not gonna lose money this year.
Yeah.
If, as I appreciate the auto inspection and maintenance program, if we put within, the question was about some of the trucks that go through the community, not carrying waste necessarily, but belching out various things that they do. If we do an appropriate auto inspection and maintenance, I'm assuming the trucks ought to be included as well. We're probably running into the PSC problem.
No, trucks not included in inspection maintenance.
They aren't, should they?
That's the point, but in this particular package, it won't include trucks.
So trucks need to be added in terms of auto inspection, is that what we're saying?
You're talking about industrial trucks?
Just be careful, now, look, we gotta get the issues out, and then we break down the specifics, okay? We got trucks, we'll get back to Pam, we'll get back to Pam.
All right, the next issue that we've got to do, the state has got to mandate that we close Mississippi River Gulf Outlet and stop the saltwater intrusion. And that has got to be a high point now. We have discovered that Mississippi Gulf Outlet is causing this. How the state is going to regulate this and do this, because we're involved with the federal government, but we support it too much with state money also. We have to pull out and demand that the federal government close Mississippi River Gulf Outlet.
Close Mr. Governor, all right? What's that? Aaron.
Well,
up with LEPCs, that's federal law,
Right.
okay? That's not something the state can deal with. You know, we have a state right to know law, but it's worthless. You know, and I don't know if legislatively we can deal with that this session with all we've got on our plate. But, you know, the federal law, they're trying to strengthen that this year with dealing with LEPC. So.
If there are, let me say one other thing, so that we can get wrapped up. If there is something on some of these lists that you think are very important, need to be on here, these are the controlling lists. This is just motivation, okay?
Bad boy bill. Bad boys on this list. Six and seven on this list.
Tell you what, listen, she has a good idea. Hold on just a second, hang on. If we can agree that there are certain numbers on here that are already written out, everybody agrees ought to be on this list, we could just do it by number rather than debating too much.
Yeah.
Number seven, it's already up there. Number six. Okay, that's on mine.
Number 6 and number 7, just.
Number two, we've already done. Hold on just a second. Bingo. Number 6, that's the bad boy bill. Hold on. Great. Whoa, one at a time. Cross reporting is number 7. Does everybody agree on that? Yes, right. Is there anything on here that nobody wants to put on?
Right. They're all pretty good. All in favor? Yeah. Number 3.
I mean, are you kidding about a bad boy bill? I mean, we would waste all our energy.
There's some things that could be done on energy, but that bill,
My respect.
I think we can put the focus at the regulatory level.
I still think.
What we're going to do, unless people disagree, is incorporate this list into the bigger list that we're making, with the exception of least cost energy. Not that it's not important. All of the advocates who work on that issue every day agree that it's something we do next year to focus on regulation issues. Okay, but without exception, except for that, all of these are incorporated now. So the question is, are you all right with that? You have another?
I think you ought to put energy efficiency on there. I just think it ought to be on there.
I don't mind it being on there, but I'm not sure what kind of push we can do during this legislative session. I think if there's something that.
Well, I don't know if you're gonna do anything this legislative session, but I think until people start hearing about energy efficiency over and over again, it's not gonna make much sense. So have it on the list so people get used to seeing it.
Before we get too far, he will move, Lena and me, I'm gonna leave it a minute. Bill, and then we're talking about these advisory committees, and there was one on solid waste and one on something else. And he said if we submitted names, agriculture, if we submitted names, this coalition would submit names that they would certainly consider it. I would like to ask this board, I would like to put the name of Melissa Thorne, I'd like to nominate her for the solid waste committee.
I'm sorry we didn't fit your agenda today. She's so
We just
shy.
wanted the
I like
coalition.
it. As I appreciate it, we're changing topics here very quickly. And
I know, but I
since
don't
somebody
want
has
to
to go
lose
back
that.
to Lake Charles, we're trying to put somebody on the solid waste commission.
Yeah, and then I would like Sister Helen to go on, us to submit her name for agriculture.
Charlie said he couldn't do anything.
Yeah, but he said he would look at it, he said he would try.
He needs somebody on the DEQ advisory committee to coordinate and work with agriculture. That will give him that.
Everybody comfortable with Melissa and Helen taking that role?
Well, that's also, didn't Mary want to serve on solid? We're both on solid.
And Wilma too.
Everybody. Wilma doesn't want to do it.
Oh, okay.
But Mary does.
Melissa does too.
Well, pending approval of my boss.
Hey, he's out of town, too bad.
Could Mary Lee send a letter to them saying that this coalition of 99 environmentalists around the state to submit those names?
Whatever y'all comfortable with. As long as we're not leaving somebody out who wants to be a part of it.
Does anybody else want to be on the list?
While we're writing a letter.
One last separate issue, if I might just throw it in, is I have heard from several individuals that the Wildlife and Fisheries and Scenic Rivers Act accepted legislation has virtually no teeth in it, so that every time we have a problem with the river, etc., well, gee, why don't we call them? They can help us surely. No, they can't. Do we have to maybe check into how we can enable those folks to do what we think that they're capable of doing now?
We just filed a lawsuit against them on Wednesday over Scenic Rivers.
So the idea there is to, look, let me tell you where we are. We're wrapping up right now on making this list, and then we're going to do the hard part, and us in this room are the very worst at it, all right? Which is trying to focus and prioritize and decide what we really are going to try to do in this session. It's very important for us to do that, because if we don't do it, we go off like a shotgun, and we might hit something and we might not, all right? So I wanted to get you to stay focused here for just a little while longer. We try to make those hard decisions, most of which we won't agree on. We're going to have to find a way to do that, to stay focused on that. Carl, if I heard what you say, it was try to put teeth into scenic rivers. Is that right?
And I think that has to be done through the legislative process.
Well, legislatively, what you could do is, they have to do management plans for the scenic rivers. What you could do is legislatively tell them what has to go into those management plans, because right now, their
And the time
management
schedule.
plans, there's already a time schedule.
Well, are they keeping to it?
No, that's why they got sued. So, hopefully they're gonna keep the schedule now, but.
And we might have to, I'm told that they're also doing away with a lot of the funding into some of the programs, so that in fact it may be that it's being undermined by the
We just
administration.
have to watch budget-wise, so.
Do they have an enforcement section for dollar fines for violations?
Anything else in terms of issues that you definitely want to have as a part of this next discussion?
Here's the pesticide use again. We need some type of communication networks with the herbicide, like the drainage ditch, they'll come along and spray, and maybe at the same time the mosquito control spray that afternoon in the truck, or the utility company comes along and sprays right behind that.
So some sort of a required coordination of the use of pesticides and herbicides in the community. So on one hand knows what the other hand is doing. There's a kind to ask question.
This is a kind of ask question, or kind of nosy, but I think I'm right in asking this, what I'm saying is, we talk about DEQ and those things that are going on in the environment. Well, I was just sitting here thinking about it. We keep on having to have these legislative solutions that go along with it. Isn't it so that someone should be able to report and do a revision in 3 months or 6 month intervals with DEQ and find out, are these things that have already been in satisfaction in orders being done? Or do you think that's revisions that we don't, or is it somehow someone checks this at 3 months or 6 month intervals to see if, what DEQ has already implemented and said in their ordinance and, rules are being done?
Some kind of a mandated reporting on the implementation of environmental regulations.
Yeah. Why don't we have a revision of 3 months or 6 months, a revision, you see what would happen is that we keep saying, okay, well, last year we implemented, but who did what to see was it carried out? Why don't we take a 3 month, 6 month interval and look at these revisions that we proposed, or that they said they added, and let's get on with it, you know? So next year, we don't come back with the same one saying that didn't work last year. If it's adopted, let's look at it every 3 months. Let us take a look at the environmental and personal.
Well, I will offer a practical suggestion there that the theory sounds like a very good one. Every 3 months would be virtually impossible for any state agency to carry out and do the work at the same time.
Every 3 months, last 6 months. I
So
mean,
if you
it's
could,
just
but a timely reporting mechanism on the implementation of environmental regulations, figure out how,
not environmental regulation. See, we're sitting here saying about restricting, we're doing restructuring the agriculture committee and all that stuff. Well, suppose it doesn't happen within a year. See what I'm saying? What doesn't happen if it doesn't happen in a year? Although they may say, we'll adopt this, and this is what will happen. If it doesn't get done in a year. You see, we need an enactment upon, when we keep doing this, why we just keep doing this?
does that capture that mandated reporting on implementation of environmental
some ways it's related to these costs that we might want to focus on, and that has to do with making it illegal for imprudent utility expenditures being passed on to ratepayers. And the Supreme Court allowed the Public Service Commission to pass on some imprudent costs in the Riverbend nuclear power plant, and it's a loophole that has emerged, and it has a lot of environmental implications. So that may be, as far as energy, that may be something that we could look at as a subset.
So put in sort of a precisely that is legislative closing of the improved cost loophole.
Yes. But in other words, disallowing imprudent costs that have been determined to be the result of bad management at the utility being passed on to ratepayers. Often those are emerging in cases where the worst kind of power plants. 2:30.
Yep, almost 2:45. What we're going to try to do now is to see if we can agree on those things that are most important to us that we want to begin the session with, and in the session having achieved. Several factors will affect this. One obviously is just how much coordination and organization that we can affect with these people in the room and the people that we represent. There's only so much time and only so much energy. So how much of that we have to think about here very clearly. The second thing is the nature of the opposition. What things are we most likely to achieve? What things should we try to achieve whether we can or not? But we have to put a very realistic assessment on how we go forward here. That's not to stop dreaming. That's to say we've got a legislative session coming up. It'll run for 3 months. What can we get done in that session? Okay? So let's see what we can do.
All right, I want to address an issue that I know is near and dear to everybody's heart, and that one is auto inspection and maintenance. We all recognize that the major precursors for ozone are small. Automobile exhaust and engine. But in Louisiana, we need to take a really hard look at that and see where the real source is. And what I see is a trend, a tendency, I mean, I can just see this thing coming, that Mr. DEQ is going to be really tough, he's going to really come in and clean up the environment, but it's going to put the burden on citizens, not on industry where it belongs. Now, the community where we live, where the ozone readings are, the so-called vapor station is in Allison. The wind blows from the south most of the time, in the summertime. That station in Allison has the highest ozone readings in the city, more than any other station in Baton Rouge. Now, you come and you check out Allison. There's relatively little traffic going through there. The ozone level is being caused not so much by automobile exhaust as it is being caused by industry. But you're going to suddenly jump on citizens, tighten up things. Of course, we all should have our automobiles in good shape. But who are you hitting? You're hitting mainly your poor citizens. That's who that bill is really going to hit. And at the same time, you aren't going to do very much to reduce your ozone. So it's going to be like, hey, we've done something wonderful when you haven't done anything.
Might I suggest that we number each one of these, and each person has 3 votes, and you stand on your honor and vote. If you go through one, how many people vote, and then we'll know how to prioritize these things? Is that what we're going to take our priorities list from?
We can do it by numbers. We can do it by consensus. If we want to do it,
Prioritize it when we have so many unless we vote somehow. And if everybody has 3 votes only, that would make them vote for their top 3 bills. And as you go through, like number 1, you count each vote and say how many, then you'll know your priorities.
is everybody comfortable with that? Anybody here? That's right. It's a good standard way to do it. When you're in situations like this, you try to find a way that most give people flexibility and total it up.
We don't have time to be like
One thing that I think that we need to put as one of our top priorities that isn't on the list and that isn't a specific bill is to make sure that none of the existing environmental reforms that we have in place now are rolled back. And I think that that's a realistic goal, and I think that that's something that we really need to shoot toward and put our energies toward, is watching what's there and making sure that the LCA and the oil companies don't come in and roll back the existing.
No rollback. Good point.
I would suggest, yeah, that's right, can we pass that?
No rollback.
I would suggest that that's very much a part of a press strategy that we need to affect all the way through the session, and certainly in any kickoff announcement of what the priorities of the environmental community are. Absolutely, first and foremost, it has to be made very clear that we intend on trying to make sure that occurs, and in fact, those commitments were made by the now sitting governor during the campaign, both in writing and verbally. So I think we have the tools to try to do that, but that's a very good point. That has to be number one all the way around. Is everybody hearing it? I don't know if you heard this or not. We're talking about given the lack of time, given the discussions here, giving everybody 3 votes, letting them put those 3 on any of these numbers that they want, and let's call it up and see where we're going to go for that. Is everybody comfortable with that? You want to just write it down on a piece of paper, or you want to just raise your hand?
We can't, just write it on.
Raise your hands.
That way we know that we're voting on the right thing. Y'all need to read each one that we're voting on, that way everybody knows they're voting on the right thing.
Number on the list because it's part of the big number one of protecting those gains we've already made. Agree with that? Okay.
And the question, the number 2, the industrial siting, I think we have the legislators advise us, and perhaps the lawyers can, as to whether this should not be something we attempt to do with the legislature, but more with getting DEQ to publish regs.
Well, let's do this. That's a sort of a strategic decision that's going to require more information than probably we have right now. If what we can do is to develop this sense of concern on the part of the membership here. Then, when we get down to actually writing bills and that sort of stuff and getting people to carry them, that sort of winnows itself out. You just have to make those strategic decisions along the way. Everybody ready to count? Just write it down. Is that? Well, number 2, let's start with number 2. Is number 2. I'm going to read it. You got 3 votes. You can use them anywhere you want, but you only got 3. We all trust each other. The first one is number 2 up here, which is the auto inspection maintenance program. Is that part of, that's not part of it?
That's a federal law. It's going to happen whether we want it or not. This is our chance to tailor it to Louisiana. If we don't pass that this session, we'll have federal sanctions placed against our state. They'll cut our highway money. I mean, well, they know that. So whatever, it is a federal law.
Okay. That's number 2. Does everybody know that? Understand it? Raise your hands if you want to vote for that. Voting on number 2, you get to use one of your 3 votes. Okay? Voting closed. Number 3, as I appreciate it, is an initiative on solid waste, which would include elements such as the bottom bill, incinerator moratorium, yard waste excluded from landfills. Anything else that was included in that?
Does the incinerator moratorium include medical waste, hazardous waste, and solid waste, or just solid waste? We didn't take it that far. All incinerators.
But just use it.
So it's more than a solid waste initiative, it's a Louisiana waste policy package.
Well, that's a lot broader. I'd say for the purposes of this discussion right now, this is a solid waste not saying it's right, well, I'm just saying for discussion right here, we may also need a separate entity. But in terms of number 3, this is a solid waste initiative to focus on incinerator moratorium, bottom fill, yard waste excluded, and probably some other elements that will be added to put together.
Can I make a notation on this? Solid waste incinerator? Municipal solid waste is more toxic than legally hazardous. Hey, what do we, as components that are really waste?
They have to raise their hand for that.
You can put 2 votes on one.
Well, this is Teresa's proxy.
Oh, is that it? Okay.
Okay, is everyone voting? Who's voting?
For the
Vote on number 3, the solid waste initiative. Including a moratorium on solid waste incineration.
You got an extra vote.
You have 3 votes.
Oh, okay. I didn't think so.
You got them? We got them all? Everybody up? All right. Hang with us, folks. We got a ways to go. Don't give up yet. Number 4 is a Louisiana Environmental Policy Act, a Louisiana NEPA. All right. Number 5, this is restructure the Agricultural Commission, and if that is done, to change it from advisory to regulatory.
One lady who's not here who would have voted for
Yeah. Well, she spoke up on it.
All right, number 6.
Now, you remember, number 6 is not the same as the one she has on in.
That's right. This is not on the list that you got in front of you. I'm going strictly off this sheet right now, okay? Buffer zone of 5 miles from residences for solid and hazardous waste landfill.
And it also includes industrial, it's the whole site.
Oh, I'm sorry. It also, that's a buffer zone of 5 miles for hazardous waste, period. Or
Hazardous waste or hazardous process?
Hazardous products.
say that the way you said that.
Anyone who uses, generates, handles, stores, or disposes of. So in other words, manufacturing with hazardous materials. Is everyone?
Hazardous waste, now, let's get this straight.
It's not just hazardous, it's not hazardous,
No,
too.
don't know which one. 13 would only relate to materials stored. Oh, okay, then, that, you got another vote.
Everyone raise your hand one more time, you said.
I don't agree with the 5 tonight. Yeah.
All right, got it. Number 7, this is a legislative resolution to implement the IT decision.
This is the one that'll help us make a statement with environmental impact statement whenever they want to locate a facility. This one is really more achievable.
And this would, this would have an impact of requiring any state action, as I appreciate it. Not only building a highway, which federal would require, but building a new building somewhere, any state decision affecting the environment would be required to take into consideration environmental impact.
Everyone raise your hand, that one more time.
Any state decision does, that's what IT does. It's very comprehensive.
It'd be a lot easier to have an environmental impact study done on anything than to think that we've tried every year to get a buffer zone. We can't even get a 1 mile buffer zone. What's the chance of getting a 5 mile buffer zone? We've tried that bill every year, that buffer zone. Yeah, so the environmental impact, even if it's relating to strictly citing facilities, period, that's gonna be a lot more achievable. I mean, even the legislature said that this morning. We have a chance of this one, and we still have our IT decision there to work, you know, the words to still use.
Okay, number 7, everybody voted the way they wanted to?
I think I got it.
You got that? I want to vote. Number 8. This would be clarify that local governments are not preempted from imposing requirements aimed at promoting health and safety that are more stringent than those imposed by the state. Number 9, this would create a pesticide use reporting system and a regulation system. I'm assuming what that's saying that we're not happy with it being done the way it's done, so we'll do it ourselves in the legislature. Is that basically it? That would indicate areas where there would be no spraying, would have a notification statute. It would require the certified applicator be on site, require research on alternatives. It's a fairly comprehensive look at and regulation of pesticide use in the community. All right? Number 9. Okay, is that it? Hands down. Number 10, revise public notification for permits so that number 1, there is timeliness. In other words, notification comes in time. Number 2, there is a size of the print and of the ad that can be seen by normal people. And number 3, so that the words that are used both in the ad and in the notification that's mailed out are something that is understandable to the average working person as well. That's number 10. Number 11, we set up a fish tagging process for fish caught in contaminated waters. It will require fish caught in contaminated waters to be tagged. Okay. Number 12, we put in place indoor air laws that would regulate smoking in public places and in work sites. Anything else besides smoking? I will tell you, well, we've already voted. 13, a residential buffer zone for storage of hazardous materials on train cars, rail cars. Let's see. Elements of that would be system 2 railroads, which I think may be done. We also were told that the federal regs are those which affected LEPCs. So public notification of storage areas was very important in that process. And as I appreciated it, a strong push for the enforcement of those regulations, the implementation, even if they are even if they are federal, but a strong push to have that regulated within the state. All right? That was fairly concise.
Okay.
Number 14, close Mississippi River Gulf out. Legislatively mandate what goes into the management plan for scenic rivers. Is that right? Scenic rivers. Scenic rivers. Going on.
My gun's in.
You're not even moving.
My gun's in.
That's a true Democrat there. I like that. Number 16, mandated reporting on implementation of environmental revisions. she wants to include that in the number 1 issue, which is make sure we don't have any rollbacks. So that's the way to do that. All right. Number 17. Legislative closing of imprudent energy cost loophole, which is the Public Service Commission's Public Service Commission decides if Grand Gulf is in their management of Grand Gulf, if they have spent money unwisely. If they do decide that, or if the courts decide that, the suggestion is that it not be included in the rate base, so that the taxpayer or the ratepayer doesn't have to pick up that cost of bad decisions. It's a good idea, it's just hard to get there.
I think people just use their 3 votes on it.
Has anybody got any votes on that?
Yes,
Let me guess on which one.
Well,
All right. Now
Juan
we're
is
good.
recording this, and anybody that voted 1 or 3 times, Juan's gonna get it.
That's right, we've got them on tape. We're just about finished here, y'all. Hang it in there. Let me go through the ones to the left on the sheet of paper that we haven't covered yet. Number 6, which is the bad boy bill, prohibit the issuance of government contracts or permits to businesses previously convicted of certain crimes.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, makes it correct. It just makes them, get them on the record. All right, bad boy bill, raise your hand. Okay, number 7, a bill on false reporting, which would make knowing or willful false reporting or non-reporting under Louisiana environmental statutes and regulations a criminal offense. That's good. That's real good. That's right. Everybody's got a vote. Number 8, which would be sort of a companion bill, would reward persons supplying information leading to the imposition of environmental penalties, a portion of the penalty collected. So if you catch them and they get caught, you get paid for it.
Haven't got one call yet, but any day.
Does anybody have any votes left? You got one left? Where do you want to cast it?
Number 14.
All right. That's right. If they don't have any more votes left, we've got some good things here, but everybody's already voted.
Couldn't we suggest that the bad boy bill be part of the IT regs?
No, probably not. Now, let me also tell you that the prioritization that occurred here doesn't mean that some of these other bills aren't going to be filed, okay? I mean, there are a lot of good ideas, a lot of things that need to be done. What we're trying to get a sense of is how we can communicate directly to the legislature and to those guys especially who are going to help us, those priorities that we have, so that we can keep focused, okay? What do we need up there? Number 1,
Industrial. In Louisiana, it was only IT. Didn't have it. Here's the list right here, as I appreciate it, Amy. This is actually number 5, and this is number 6, is that right? Okay, let's go together. That was a pretty good process if you look at what washed out. It came out pretty good. Number 1, as we agreed, was maintain the progress that we made in the last 4 years, no rollback. Number 2 was a solid waste initiative. That's something that we ought to really get on, and given the fact that the department is also saying that it's something they're very concerned about. We ought to see if we can make some headway on that. Number 3 is the approach of a Louisiana environmental
Legislative resolution.
Environmental Policy Act. Right? Number 4 would be a resolution to require the implementation of the IT decision across state government. Number 8, tell me the difference between these two.
Pesticides was number 9, with all of this reporting.
Okay, a comprehensive management program for pesticides, including reporting and regulation, and then restructuring the pesticide commission. Is that what's called, the pesticide advisory commission? And if it can be restructured, making it regulatory, not advisory. So really, those two things will go together fairly well if we can accomplish both. All right. Congratulations.
Excuse me, Steve.
I can add something to that, but the idea of press conferences in each of the local communities where representatives of the local groups on the same day each talk about those parts that they're interested in, and this statewide list of priorities would be able to do two things. It would be able to demonstrate at the community level with people who they do relate to, because they're from their community, that these decisions have been made statewide and are being announced across the state, and all the communities have a particular bet. If it's done before the legislature, the media will still be at home and will cover it. And the second thing is that it does feed into all of these groups acting as one group under the umbrella of Louisiana Environmental Action Network, which is what the intention was all along, as I appreciate the lean anyway. So that may be a very good way to do that.
The example being that the local retirement type community may or may not have much impact on a representative, but if they hear that AARP is involved,
Right.
all of a sudden, boy, they're real interested.
Yeah.
So if we can develop to that stage where when someone hears that either Louisiana Environmental Community or LEAN is involved and this is what they say, they immediately know that, hey, we better listen because the network is really humming along and we're talking
That
big
works in
numbers.
Baton Rouge to some extent when you start getting outside of
It
that.
doesn't happen where I am.
And then even in New Orleans, because New Orleans is so myopic, it doesn't mean as much as it ought to. But that may be a real good way to step forward. I would suggest one other thought in terms of press strategy, Darrell, and you may not want to do this, but I might separate the two. I might do the book the week before, and then do this as a priority the week, if nothing else other than to keep it top of mind and to make sure that that's 2 hits 2 weeks in a row, going into the legislative session so that you get the kind of awareness of that.
That's fine for me. You know, my main idea in pulling this together was, I wanted to have something that we put in the legislature's hands that looks professional and says that we're here to play the game hardball this year. And, you know, we want to, you know, if we come back and say, these are our 6 priorities, the day they start the session, that's fine with me. I'm one for holding press conference. I'm that guy there.
Good, I want to say good afternoon and thank you for inviting me up here. It's nice to get out of the city. I sort of asked myself, when Darrell asked me to come, I said, wow, me way out in Burnside. That sounds like North Louisiana. We tend, if we live in the city, I think many times to be somewhat ignorant of the lay of the land, so to speak, outside of New Orleans. And we also tend to be, and I think people are, in the city, sometimes not as traditionally aware of environmental issues as people who might live in small towns or in rural areas or in areas where there are chemical plants. But I think what I've seen is a growing and a new awareness in urban areas about the importance of environmental issues. Not only environmental issues which directly impact urban areas, issues like lead, issues like drinking water quality, issues like solid waste reduction, but even the broader range of issues that you all are all concerned with. I am starting this session in 2 weeks, and I'm eagerly anticipating the beginning of the session. I've been installed without even asking as the vice chair of the Environmental Quality Committee. I did ask to serve on the committee, and it came to me as a pleasant surprise when I was picked as vice chair. I must tell you that I don't know what the powers of the vice chair of the committee will be other than to pinch hit for the chairperson in presiding over those meetings. But on a much more serious note with respect to the committee, I hope to sponsor and be an activist legislator. What I am pledged and committed to do is to be someone who's going to have initiatives and ideas and not simply sit back and play defense. I think that one of the mistakes, if you will, that many citizen activist groups have made over the years, and I'm one who's been involved in environmental issues and in voting rights issues and in other issues, which have sprung from the needs of citizens and not from the needs of necessarily moneyed interests, is that sometimes we have not been activist-oriented enough inside the legislature. And by that I mean, many times I'm sure we find ourselves playing defense, trying to put on a goal line stand to prevent the erosion of some gains that have been won, or to prevent the turn back of things, or we're trying to defeat power grabs by certain special interest groups. We play defense. I am pleased that you're engaging in a participatory process here today to develop an agenda. And what I want you to know is that I hope that I will be able to sponsor some ideas that spring from this meeting, to put my name on pieces of legislation that make progress in the issue of environmental affairs. I want to let you know that on Thursday, I was one of the people who went down to Fort Lauderdale. I'm sure you all heard about that, to visit a refuse to energy plant, which is a form of incineration. But let me tell you a point that they made in Fort Lauderdale, and the point was not necessarily made by the people who were sponsoring the plant, but by some of the people from the county. The important thing about what they're doing in Fort Lauderdale is not what technology they're using. The important thing is that they've been working on solid waste reduction for 15 years. They've been working on strategies for 15 years. If you look at what we're doing in this state, this idea or this thought process of solid waste reduction, mainstreaming it into the public policy arena is brand new. And we're 15 years behind the times. They've got curbside recycling, and they've had it for a long, long time. They've got education going on in the schools to teach children about recycling. We don't have any of that in Orleans Parish. I don't know what you've got. I know you've got recycling. We don't have any of it in the largest city in the state. We don't have any of it in 1992. And what I observed there was, independent of whether that plan and that idea is a good idea, what impressed me is that they've been working on a strategy for 15 years. We have a lot of catching up to do in this state, a considerable amount of catching up to do in this state with respect to important environmental issues. I can't stand here and give you a political read on the Senate or on the Committee on the Environment. You all may know more about the people on that committee than I do as a freshman. I sort of had a dream. There's 7 people on the committee, and that dream was that I may end up being on the end of some 6-to-1 votes in the committee when I looked at some of the people on the committee. But I want you to know that doesn't bother me. That it doesn't bother me to have to stand alone on some things that are important. Because I know that to stand alone today might mean to stand in the majority 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years from now. And I say that to say that I hope that you continue to raise a lot of hell, but to do it in an intelligent fashion, that you come to the legislature and you are visible. And that you do perhaps what I think is the most important thing, and that is mobilizing the people in your communities to call, to come, and to watch. The other thing, and I heard you all talking about it a little bit as I walked in, was the issue of being politically involved. I must tell you that I've been a board member of the Alliance for Affordable Energy for about 5 or 6 years. And both times I ran, my involvement with the Alliance for Affordable Energy was used by some people to blacklist me in New Orleans, to blacklist me, and to cut me off from endorsements from the newspapers, to cut me off from support from certain groups. And I want you to know that it is important that you let those people who are going to be willing to stand up and vote for what's right on the environment, that when it's time for them to run, you're going to be there. You're going to be there in person, in mind, in body, and in spirit. Because ultimately, you can't get there unless the people elect you. You can't stay there unless the people elect you. And the difficult thing about politics in this era is that it takes money and it takes resources. Good ideas and a good person are not enough. There's something to start with. It takes money, it takes organization, it takes resources in order for one to be elected. And I say that to say that I think the environmental movement in this state must become much more politically active, involved in the endorsement of candidates, supporting candidates, giving people the support, and not simply sitting back, and I may disagree with you on this, picking 1 or 2 people you think you got to knock out, but trying to at least demonstrate to some people that they don't support you, you can cause them problems. If they do support you, you're going to be there when they need you. And that is so important because I have experienced it firsthand in both of my races. That my involvement in some things that I believe strongly about and were used when I went into certain interviews. It was mentioned and it was said, because of your involvement with this group, we can't mess with you. We can't support you. We can't be with you. In fact, we ain't even going to consider anything else that you have to say. And you all need to know that that's the kind of thing that goes on in this state. And that means that people who want to stand up need to know and need to feel that there's going to be a support network out there in their districts. The other thing on the political side of it is, and I think you'll probably be pleased to know this, that in both of my races, I've done a considerable amount of polling in New Orleans. Extensive polling about issues that concern the public. And what I've found, and this is probably much to the surprise of many people, maybe not you and not me, is that environmental issues rank very high in the minds of the people when they talk about issues that concern them. In fact, in my district, it ranks second only to the problem of crime and drugs. And that's pretty impressive, that it ranks a little higher than education, a little higher than unemployment and jobs. And I think that's a point to be used when trying to educate people. This issue is a new issue in the sense that it is a new issue in the mainstream of traditional politics. And because it's a new issue, it is very easy for people to be victimized by misinformation. Victimized by misinformation coming from certain lobbyists who represent certain interests in this state. It is very easy for a lobbyist to say, look, we've checked out, we meet the regulations, we've got 75 scientists lined up this type of emission, or this or that or the other. One thing I hope you can provide for me is that body of technical experts and technical advisors to help us combat that. When someone comes before a committee and they give all their PhDs and 3Ds and DDs and everything else and say, look, I'm giving you an opinion. I'm giving you an opinion that we've got something to counteract that information with, or at least something to challenge that information with. I look forward to meeting all of you all on a personal basis when the session begins. I urge you to stop by my office. I urge you to come by the committee. I urge you to give me your ideas. I urge you to bring things to my attention that you are concerned about early on. Remember, I am new, and this is my first session. And to some extent, you all know much more about the environmental issues that have been important to you in the past. I've done as much reading as I can, as much listening as I can, but I need your help. And I'm here to ask you to not wait until the day that something comes before a committee or that there's going to be a vote to let me know about it if it concerns you. Because a lot of times in the legislative process, what is important is being able to ask the right questions, develop the right countervailing testimony, to help work on the people who may be weak or who may be strong, to offer the types of amendments that we need to offer to try to adjust some things, or to try to kill some things, or to come up with some competing legislation which might have the same objective, but maybe something we can live with. The legislative process is very, very complicated. We have to get smart. We've got to be intelligent. We've got to use our friends in the way that will achieve the objectives that we want to achieve. So I want to respond to any questions you have. I didn't talk to you too much about some of the legislation that I'm going to sponsor. Maybe before I close, I should mention that I will propose what I think are probably two most important bills in the area of the environment. A bill to restructure the Lake Pontchartrain Basin Foundation. As you know, the foundation has gone through considerable turmoil, and I think that one of the reasons that it's gone through the turmoil is that the proverbial child has outgrown its parent. The foundation was set up as a creature of the Causeway Commission. Legislatively, the Causeway Commission, I believe, selects all but 4 board members. I don't think that the future of the foundation and the objectives of the movement can be met with that type of structure. So I'm going to propose legislation to allow the associate members to nominate and elect a majority of the board members of the Lake Pontchartrain Basin Foundation. I know that there will probably be a number of other competing bills, but it will be an important issue. My own view of it is that a temporary solution where people sit down around the table and maybe hammer out a solution to the problem may be playing in the hands of those who want to get through this legislative session without allowing any changes to occur in the structure, and then maybe go back to trying to run it in the way that it's been run since the ousters occurred. So I will have a bill to restructure the foundation. The other thing that I'm going to propose is a bill to create the New Orleans Regional Recycling and Resource Recovery Authority. Now, for those of you who are familiar with what's called an independent political subdivision, the whole idea of this authority is to create a regional governmental structure that can plan solid waste reduction strategies. And it will be charged with recycling, It will be charged with solid waste reduction. I am not through with the legislation, but what I'm going to try to do is graft in to the management board a manner in which environmental organizations will be able to nominate people to sit on the board in the decision-making strategy. I will have more information on that later, but those are two pieces of legislation that I'm going to sponsor this session to deal with important things in the New Orleans area and things that my constituents have brought to my attention. So with that, I thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much. Let me tell you what I did. We were met there by some people who were handing out some leaflets, and there was some demonstration in front of the plant when we went. And we were given, I was provided with some information, and I read up on it about mercury emissions and the problems down there in the Florida Everglades. And what I did when we were in the meeting is I challenged the man who was making the presentation about mercury, because that's the specific problem that's been identified in southern Florida. And I just want to share with you what he said, because again, I asked the question because I don't think it would have been appropriate for me to sit there and have it on my mind and not ask it. Because at first some people ask polite questions. Well, what problems have you had? And you know, these corporate spokesmen are pretty adept at, you know, ducking and dodging and dancing, and you know, he danced around the question. And I asked him very specifically, I said, you're accused of emitting mercury into the atmosphere. There's a moratorium being considered in this state to prevent any more incinerators from being permitted until such time as this problem can be studied. What is your response? And what the man said was something to the extent that the biggest problem is what comes into the waste stream, what gets to the incinerator, and that they believe that 80% of the mercury that is getting into these types of incinerators is due to batteries, automobile batteries and flashlight batteries, beaker batteries, calculator batteries.
It's also in pesticides, it's in plastics, as an antibacterial.
Let me just finish telling you what he said. I'm reporting.
Okay.
I'm not telling you I believe him, but it's important to understand what their position is if it's going to be counteracted. And he said that that's where 80% of it is coming from. And he said, well, now there are regulations on the books where this material is no longer used in the making of batteries. So that's his response. So I listened to him and I said, okay, that's your response. And that was the end of the conversation. That their position was, and I think it can be challenging. I need some help, whether that's a bogus response. But you see, when people give you technical information, and you don't have anything to go back with them at, you're sitting there and it sounds good. 80% of the people sit there and they shake their heads. Well, that's a reasonable response. That's a reasonable response, but you need tech, because the information that had been given to us when we came in, which was a flyer passed out by Greenpeace, spoke specifically of mercury and not of any other types of toxins. So the gentleman said that, and that was the end of the conversation. He didn't get any more extensive than that. You could tell he was uncomfortable when the question was asked. But again, my role, because I'm there to listen, and I went on the trip because I wanted to see what the thing was about, is to ask the questions and then come back and see if there's any legitimacy to the response. It would have been inappropriate for me to sit if I had not gone on the trip. Some people may have chosen not to go. If I had not gone on the trip, I would not have had an opportunity to see firsthand. If I had not gone on the trip, I would not have had an opportunity to ask them what their position was. If you don't know what their position is, you don't know what they're telling people to line up support Friday.
Charles Osborne, who
Mhm.
sits on Verda, who's the lobbyist for
LMA,
LMA,
right.
is going around the state pushing garbage incinerators. His facts are wrong. I have taped him, I have gone back to my research. Daryl went to Europe, didn't you, Daryl? To look at the incinerators over there. What Pasqua says and what's going on are two different stories. Pasqua went on the incinerator company tour. He didn't talk to the people who live downwind of the facilities, or worse, the landfills. In Europe, the ash from the garbage incinerators is declared hazardous waste. In the United States, it can go into a sanitary landfill.
You're not permitted to drink the milk from the dairy cow.
In the
From
Netherlands.
incinerators that are downwind. I mean, cow's milk is contaminated.
Let me tell you, and I want to tell you a little bit more because I think that they're going to bring some other groups out there. And let me tell you why the companies that owns and operates the facility, two facilities in Broward County, is Wheeler Greater Inc.
Yeah.
50, let me just,
55% on my
yeah,
reading.
let me finish telling you what the tie-in is. So, here to give information. They are owned by Waste Management, but the boilers are made. Babcock and Wilcox, a subsidiary of McDermott, which is headquartered in New Orleans. What they want to do, they are looking to produce these boilers in a self-contained fashion. And they're looking for a market. They're looking for areas that they can sell these boilers where they can build it in one piece, put it on a barge, and float it in. Obviously, if that's that's why they're focused on Louisiana. They're focused on Louisiana because one, Waste Management has a large presence in this state.
We're an easy touch.
Has a large presence in this state. And secondly, if they find the markets here, it makes sense for what they're trying to
Besides
do.
that, we're
Babcock and
desperate.
Wilcox. So know that as some additional information in terms of, I want to let you know, I'm not sold on refuse to energy. But whenever I have a chance to go see something, I'm gonna go. I'm not gonna not go, because for me not to go is not to use the access that I have as a member of the Senate. Yes?
Are you familiar with the Surreal report?
No, ma'am.
Okay, this is a report that was commissioned by the California Waste and Energy Board. And what it did was it studied those factors which would make a community more likely to accept and separate. Waste and energy incinerators. But it has some other very, in addition to characterizing the kind of communities that are less likely to fight on, it has some very other statements in it. And I think I'll copy this. I think that it's something that I would like to see really familiar.
If you provide, I'd like you to provide it with me.
It's about this thick, and it's gonna take me a little time to copy.
Just mail it.
Here's an outline of the Sorrel report. Just an outline of the Sorrel report here.
Okay.
It tells communities that are most likely to be targeted. And it gives you just what a legislator needs in about 5 seconds. It shows you how they target things. You know, we would, today when you walk out here, I'd like you to walk out here with a copy of this book to see how we're being targeted by big industry. You're asking us to give you technical advice. God, do you know how much trouble we're going through getting our own technical advice? Nobody. The only people who are educated is industry on what they're doing. You know, how many times we get up and we fight for these things and we have no backup systems. We expect DEQ to be our backup system. It's hell when you gotta fight DEQ to make them do what they're supposed to be doing for us. This is not, something that we can ask. Our legislator is supposed to be up there representing us. I'm not even allowed to talk to my legislator.
Why?
Because Mr. Nunez doesn't believe I have anything worthwhile to say. Because
I am just a citizen and I don't have a whole lot of money and I hadn't contributed to his campaign. It's the way I feel about it. We have sent him letters. We have sent Mr. Odenay letters. They don't respond to us. So when our own legislators don't respond to us, now Mr. Warner has, when our own legislators don't respond to us, we're left in a position where we have absolutely no say and no voice in the government. We need to have some way of getting in and having DEQ be responsible for us without having to go, what we have to do is go to other legislators to get DEQ to be responsible for it. We have no technical background people to help us to fight these battles. We need to have DEQ make these, they have the information too available to us also.
I just want to reiterate on something she said about the DEQ. If they are allowed to change the laws to where they can take these permit applications back to the city governments to pass or rule on, we're in trouble, folks, because most of that is political. I've been fighting the system for 2.5 years, and it's political. And if we do not have the money to pass out like industry does, and if they let the local governments make the decision on these, they're going in. And we can't do anything about it. It has got to stay in DEQ.
Oh, no,
And then,
I have Royal up talking to my councilman and getting to know them all and
well, you're one of the
explaining
few.
to them, and
You're lucky.
they'll listen.
Where are you from?
What do they do?
Yeah, maybe a joke.
No, we've got to stick together on this one. We're in trouble if he changes the rules and regulations to rule that after DEQ goes through these permit applications, he'll go back to the city government.
No.
I wanted to just comment on something you said that is very close to my heart, and the reason for that is I've been involved, I'm sure you've heard of the Alert Authority. A couple of years ago, I guess, there was a presentation made to a joint committee, and Little Brady was there with all the pretty things to show about the facility, and McDermott was there on the jobs it would provide for Louisiana, if they would build these blocks that you're talking about. And then we also fought along the people who would issue the bonds to build these facilities. LERTA has the authority to own these facilities. They can mandate the waste stream to go to certain facilities. And I am right now still on LERTA. I don't know for how long, but we have a meeting Monday afternoon. And I think it's time that the people of Louisiana be really cautious. And especially, I'm so pleased that you were here today, because you will be faced with something like this discussion, dealing with exactly that. And politics is involved, even on the Alert Authority. We've been fighting that for years. That's the reason no state planning has yet happened. And it's really scary because it looks like exactly what you were saying. They've been working on this for a while. And they're ready to go with incineration throughout.
The thing I want to interject on solid waste reduction is that what I think we've got to do in Louisiana is develop a long-range plan. And the long-range plan is going to have to include a number of components. I'm not sure what all those components are going to be. Recycling should be a major.
But a dump in St. Bernard is not one of the, next to St. Bernard is not one of the answers.
You see, what I want to say is that a long-range, I don't know what a long-range plan is. For example, in New Orleans, we recycle, and we recycle to the maximum extent feasible. You can't recycle 100% of your waste. Yeah, but hold on. You can't burn it. You can't burn it all. You can't landfill it all. You can't recycle it all. You can't do anything to all 100% of it. The question for a policymaker is, what is the long-range plan? You take New Orleans, for example. No one wants another landfill, period. in Parish of Orleans. No place else to locate another land. So what do you do? What do you do? Exclude refuse to energy and incineration. What do you do? That's the hard question. The hard question to me is not, are you going to be against this? Are you going to be against that? Are you going to be for this? Are you going to be for that? That's not the hard question in solid waste. The hard question is, what in fact do you do? What is the long-range solution in Orleans Parish? Because, or in the state? And I don't really have that answer, but I know my gut tells me that unless we start working on a long-range problem now, we're going to have a big problem when landfill capacities get to the point. Now, in South Carolina, after the hurricane, you all know what happened to landfill capacity? 17 years of landfill capacity was taken up because of a major hurricane, because of all the damage that occurred. So if we had a major hurricane, we could find ourselves with the existing landfill capacity that's out there filled up. So for policymakers, what I say to you as an environmentalist is that my responsibility as a policymaker is not simply to sit back and to be opposed to things that are dangerous. It's not, it goes beyond that. It goes to trying to confect, construct, develop policy alternatives that make sense. And that's where offense comes in. Easy sometimes to play defense, to just wait for somebody to come up with something and kill it. And that's an important role of what we all have to do. But another role that we all have to play, and that I feel like I've got to play, is to try to find and develop the alternative. What is the reasonable alternative? So if we have our own alternative on solid waste reduction, then we can go out and we can sell it and we can pass it. Yes?
Okay. Good solution that will reduce your waste stream as much as an incinerator will not create the pollution is to go by the Center for Biology and the Natural Systems Plan, DOE, which is recycling, which is composting all organic waste, food contaminated, soil contaminated, paper waste, in addition to yard waste. Those are the things that come out of the bathroom that are paper, that need composted. You can go for an in-vessel system like Bedminster, separate out your recyclables, separate out your toxics, but compost the organic waste and don't burn, because you still 3 tons of trash burn reduces stuff down to 1 ton of toxic ash that's more hazardous than your original garbage. And it still goes into the landfills and they still get into the groundwater and contaminated groundwater, the food chain, and your air emissions, and our healthcare costs are high enough already.
Now, I understand that there's some problems with compost.
Not like your art.
But are there problems?
I don't know. I don't
Problems. Yes.
Absolutely.
Compost, here's my very impression. First of all, turn around and look at the board behind you where it says priorities. You voted today on the priorities of the environmental community in the legislature this year.
Solid waste.
Number 2 is the solid waste initiative. And on the board over there, it's very hard to read it, but it's the 3rd issue. We pointed out 3 different aspects of it that we'd like to look at. Bottle bill, which is very hard to pass in this state. Incinerator moratorium, and I think everybody in this room has heard strongly about that. The composting of yard waste is funny. He said if in South Carolina they had composting, I would say probably 80% of what went into those landfills would not have had to go into those landfills. And we think that we're finding alternatives both to landfilling and to incineration. We're coming along very rapidly. Bill Kaczorski, who is the assistant deputy of DEQ, was here this morning. He said DEQ's priority this year will be solid waste. So everybody is with you on this issue. There are a lot of people in this room who are experts or have expertise in different areas of it who are dying.
Where can I look at a compost What percentage of your waste is compost?
Well,
In Lafayette, it's all the yard waste except for what waste management takes to the landfill.
It's up to a potential of 30 to 40%, depending on the season, depending on what, how efficient your program is. But we feel that if you do really good recycling, really good composting, there's not that much stuff left. And therefore, it's not enough to feed an incinerator or to.
What would you do with whatever is left?
For the time being, landfill it, but we think there, people will come along with ideas for what to do, say with pieces of plastic hanger that we don't know what to do with. But there's not that, if you do it yourself at your house, and I do, I have very little garbage left over, because paper is compostable. If you take all of the paper out of your waste stream, you're taking another big, like 30 to 40% chunk out. And I know, I'm going far too much.
Yeah, I'm sorry I have to cut this off, because we got another part. I want to thank Senator Warrior once again for being here. And
An auditor came up to me and said something about us, and I said, well, it doesn't depend on us, it depends on you. I mean, we'll have a good session, we'll help you, we're a resource, we're a tool, we'll have that phone line that you can call in, we're gonna have Eloise and Susie, and that is an incredible step forward compared to where we were 4 years ago, as you well know. When I first started going down there, there wasn't anybody. But you've got to help us, and you've got to take ownership of some of those bills, and you've got to lobby your local senators or representatives, or I don't really feel it will work. I don't feel it will work even under a friendly administration if we don't do it. So I think it's a challenging time, but I think it's time. We've sort of been in school under Romer. We've sort of been under a friendly administration and learning the ropes.